Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with David.
How's it going today?
It is going amazingly kind of cold out with a slight wind chill of 75 and whatever the hell the weatherman tells me, that's always bullshit.
It's never true. It's always the opposite whenever you go outside.
That's the only job I think in history that you can be 100% wrong and still have a job. I know people go, I went to school for meteorology. I'm like, yeah, well, I can fucking walk outside and tell you it's snowing out when it's sunny and I could still have a job there.
Well, I know, and I know, like for them, the issue is like it's not all the instruments are cued in correctly, so the
Uh,
instruments will tell them one thing, and it's like, are you
all,
sure your mechanism's like refined correctly? Is it off? When was the last time this was calibrated? Things like that. So,
Look, isn't there an old saying, don't blame the instrument? Like, isn't
yep,
that if a weatherman's able to blame every instrument he owns, then maybe we should
yeah.
put more funding into the weather company. I'm just saying. I think that's that's a tough one for me because then there's like a whole option of storm chasers who are like, there are gods. We look to them as like our seers of the future. But I'm like, yeah, but they're never right. Like, can you get it right one time where it's like, hey, it's going to be 75 tomorrow. And I'm like, today's going to be the day I plan to get my groceries. I get my whole day done.
Yep.
And then you walk outside the next day and it's like snowing, hailing. There's like 3 tornadoes off to the left. And you're like,
You know what? Never mind. I'm gonna stay inside today.
where when did the memo come out? Like, it's just like, I don't understand. They're like, we're going to predict it. Like, I love it when they're predicting weeks in advance. And I'm just like, dude, you don't even know what tomorrow is going to be like. It doesn't make sense. You're telling me what the weather's going to be like on Tuesday of March when we're in fucking January.
I love the 7-day calendar because then it's like, how accurate is this going to be? It gives me a good idea what's going to happen, but I'm like, this is either going to get really sunny over the week or it's going to get really cold over the week. So we'll see.
Well, like the past 3 months, the funny thing is the weather has, and I'm not a fan of weather chats, but this is a really interesting one.
Yep.
The fact like the app updated on like the iPhones where it gives you like the specifics of like what the weather's going to be like each hour, but not just like a small degree change, like, but letting you know the moisture temperature, the humidity, like a bunch of like really, really specific stuff, even more specific than that, where I'm like, okay, I don't really give it. Like, I just want to know, do I have to put a jacket on when I walk outside? Or is my grandma going to have to be chasing me down the street? Like, you need to wear your jacket. I'm like, it's 90 degrees out. It's 90.
Leave me alone.
Yeah. Well, David, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself, man?
um, so I'm a historian by trade. I'm also going to school right now for my secondary education degree. That's what I'm finishing up right now. I also have my associates in environmental studies and in geography as well.
So you're a caring guy about the environment, and is that because that you learned throughout history we have treated it like dog shit?
Well, yes. It's that. Also, my current job right now, I work at a institution that cares very much about what happens to the environment. So that's the other part of it too. Is I see and deal with it a little bit more, and also the coworkers I have are very passionate about environmental issues. So that's the
I
other part.
mean, I've definitely at some points, like I saw the Alex Jones episode on Joe Rogan where I started like, oh, climate change isn't as bad as they say, which it's compared to media, it's a lot like the weather. They're gonna
Yep.
tell you obviously it's more drastic than it is. Like there's gonna be tornadoes every single day, like polar bears are gonna be burning and just spontaneously catching on fire. That's not true, but I get why they're doing that because we do need to act. Like as much as I say I'm not an environmentalist, I kind of really am. Like I do care about like because that's where it's our natural beauty of this earth. I mean, if you take the earth maybe 10,000 years ago, for instance, and then you look at it now, imagine it like funneled like if you saw a person when they first started smoking in their 20s to when they're 50 and it's like, oh shit, like your skin is like soaked in with some of the chemicals, like that's the earth, it's soaked in with some of the chemicals. It
Yeah.
doesn't look anything like it was before. I mean, we've completely just ravaged the whole thing.
Well, not only that, I mean, there's been historical episodes throughout time too. Like the Ohio River's caught on fire 17 times from different pollution episodes because it was a major industrial center from the Civil War until the 1970s after the Clean Water Act went in. Um, and other countries are also just doing. devastating things to their environments, like the the rainforest in South America, the rainforest in Africa, and all that. So these natural beauty areas that also keep the local ecosystems in check. Over time, if we don't pay attention to them, these small snowball effects will turn into a much worse thing. So I think that's the big thing. Like, yeah, this is all going to happen if we stop, doing our protection. If we don't watch and be mindful of this, but it's going to become in small increments until it's too late.
Well, like for instance, when I started to respect nature was when I saw a fire tornado, and I was like, that's seven layers of hell. That's scorched earth. That is something that is so monumentally powerful. And the interesting thing is how like people say like, oh, it's just plants. You can just grow another one. People always bring up statistics like we have more trees than we ever have before. And I'm like, yeah, but they're not really more. I mean, there's a more number in quantity, but quality is dog shit. We have literally made them to where they're these little thin ass trees and we can
Right.
plant more of them, but they don't grow a full lifespan. I mean, it takes what, like 20, 30 years to be able to grow a full size, strong tree, sometimes even longer than that. You know, you look at all these factors and you start to wonder, like, is our Earth alive? You got to look at some of the trees down in South Africa that literally are being able to be connected through their roots, being able to communicate to each other to be able to change the color or change what is it, the flavoring of their leaves, so
Mhm.
insects don't ravage their whole entire population. I would say. I mean, we have a whole animal kingdom for them. Why the hell are we looking at them like they're just like, well, that's a pretty tree, but I like the bird that's on it. It's like, don't give a what the it has moss that is growing on it. And then there's this white like shit that looks like it's foaming coming out of it. Is that not interesting? That's interesting to me. I don't know if that is for anybody else.
No, I mean it is interesting, and it just shows that everything's like interconnected. That's the other thing. Go back to trees. I mean, yeah, we can play on the trees, but how old are they? How much? What type of trees are they? What's the soil they're planted in? Is the soil healthy for them to continue growing? Is it sustainable for that tree to keep growing? So that's the other problem too. It's like, okay, yeah, we have all these things, but is it actually sustainable for long term for the long term?
Well, sadly, like the easiest avenue to kind of show people that like you should start caring about your environment or caring about plants, I would say, you'd have to look at like the easiest way to tackle it would be like it makes your yard look nicer. And I know that's a really shitty example, but that's the easiest way that people are going to understand like, oh, we need to actually start caring about these things because then they are starting to learn more about them. But like if you live in a city, if you live in a street, I think you don't really get to take in the option of being able to see kind of the environmental beauties because you're just so compacted with like urban like streets and you're impacted with like giant skyscrapers and stuff if you live in New York, so you really never get to truly enjoy the beauty. But then when you go out and you see it, you're taking in so much of it where you're like, oh my god, like this is a pond. I've never seen a pond before. Like I live out in like like a small beach town. So I'm near the ocean every single day. And I mean, that
Mhm.
smell of salt air, you don't really understand how much you miss it unless you don't have that. Like just walking out. I know so many people are like, I'm so jealous of you on the fact of like you can walk out on your doorstep and just smell the beach. And I'm like, yeah, I'm like, but I'm so used to it where it's like you have to really humble yourself sometimes. Like, yo, a lot of people don't ever get this experience to be able to smell literally like the salt air right in their lungs. I mean, that's the type of air that hits you and you're like, woo, it's like snorting cocaine. I've never snorted cocaine, but that's gotta be what it's like.
I know. I also live by the water too. I'm very very close to the coast. But when I was living in the south, I knew guys from all different parts of the country, and I lived like an hour and a half away from the beach. And they're like, "Oh, we're an hour away from the beach. This is awesome." Like, what are you talking about? Like, it's an hour and a half away. I'm used to like just crossing the street. Oh, this sweet. There's a lake, or there's the coastline. But that's the other thing. It's like, all right, it's kind of neat seeing people connect themselves to different things when they have the opportunity to. And some people, when they have the opportunity, they grape to nature. They just hold on to it. And some people, when they have the opportunity, they shy away from it. So it's another like letting people open themselves to nature and what it has in it.
People have this like mentality of like, when something happens, they got to do something, or if they have like these certain things that keep them to be cautious of, like, I don't know, if if like a bird flies you around your house 3 times, you got to throw like salt over your shoulder or some shit like that. I have that with people now, I think. Like, if I ask you this question, if you had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and you're at the beach and you bite into the sandwich and there's sand in it, what do you do?
If I bite into a sandwich, there's sand in it.
Yeah, do you keep eating the sandwich?
I would ask around who put sand in my sandwich, and then I might put it away. But it also depends on how hungry I am. If I haven't had lunch, I'm probably going to snack on it.
See, you fucking live by the beach. That's how I know. It's because
But
that whole concept, like when I was a kid, like even if you just open it out of a Ziploc bag or something, you start to eat your sandwich, you're like, there's a little bit of sand somehow got in here, but I'm gonna eat it anyway. And I've heard so many different answers where I'm like, stay away from you, because like the one dude's like, well, I would put it back in the bag and then I would go and probably go back to my house, make another sandwich, eat it there, and then I would probably, and I'm like, what are you doing with your life, man? Like, you're wasting precious minutes. That's ocean time, brother.
not only that, it's like depending on how far away from your house you are, it's gonna be like it could be another day trip for you to get home, make another sandwich, and then it's like you've wasted half the day at your house instead of being at the beach where you want to be anyway. So it's like, yeah, it's a small inconvenience, but not enough for me to like travel somewhere to get something else to eat to come back.
And see, I'm all about changing perspectives. I think that's the best way to understand history. So then he tosses out this when he goes, I just go back to my house. Well, I actually enjoy eating lunch because it's a very crucial time in my life. And I think a peanut butter
Yep.
sandwich is probably the best thing. That's basically heaven. So I want to make sure I can thoroughly enjoy it. And then I hear that, I'm like, all right. It's like fucking put an asterisk by your name. Like, you passed this, but just barely, bro. Just barely.
I get that.
Well, all right. So I kind of want to ask you, with history, for instance, what do you
Yep.
what's your favorite thing about it? Like, what era are we talking about? Are we talking about way back in the past? Are we talking about how like you can predict a lot of events for the future?
So I've changed my not my thought process, my interest standpoint a lot in the last like 2 years. Originally, I was a 1848 historian where I dealt with the 1848 revolutions primarily in Europe. But as I've gotten more like more life and had more experiences, I became more of an environmental historian. So now I study primarily environmental history in the U.S. from the early 20th century to current day. So depending on my interest for the day depends on where I study primarily.
Do you believe that the earth makes that has like has a song to it? Like, I think it ranges depending on who you are as a person inside, but I believe like some days like you feel more like this song and do others. But I believe like the earth has an overall tune, not in like maybe the sense of like if you want to get deep with it, like the vibrations of all of us, how we're all connected. That's definitely true. But I mean more like a song, like because I was actually thinking about this morning because it's perfect that you're on for it, even though you said your environment and then history too, or history too. So I'm like, shit, this question works both ways. If you could pick an event through history where a song would match up, what event would you say would be like the best representation of that song? Like Paul Revere's Last Ride, all right, where he's running through town saying the British are coming. I'm already thinking Old Town Road. Like fucking, that is a spot on perfect song right there.
Um, this is gonna sound corny. So one of my favorite songs I've listened to is the Three R's. Let me see if I can pull that up. It's the Three R's. It came out in the '60s, I believe. It's about reduce, reuse, and recycle, but it's to a '70s like tune. So it goes reduce, reuse, recycle, reduce, reuse, and
I
recycle.
think I remember like a Hannah Montana episode where the guy on there was doing reduce, reuse, recycle, and it was actually pretty catchy. But I think that there was a big trend when that came out, though, like back in like when I was like maybe 15, 10 years old or something. There was like this whole recycle thing. We started getting them in school, recycle bins. Everything was
Yep.
recycle, recycle, recycle. And it's like now that what they leave you a little box outside of like a gas station that says like paper, and then there's another one that says plastic, but everyone just throws it all in the paper one.
It honestly depends on where you live. So the town that I live in, it used to be that way where you had the three bins, because at that time the state couldn't separate between the two different ones. But now they can, so most people just throw them in one container. I still try to separate them because I know sometimes institutions that are picking them up doesn't have the capability to sort them, even though the state does. Um, so it depends on where you go, and also where how what you can recycle depends on the state you're in too. Like there's some states that can't recycle uh, four and above. There are some states that can only recycle 1 through 3. So that's the other thing. You have to kind of pay attention to what your marker says on the thing you're recycling.
What are the classifications on levels for recycling? Shouldn't you just be happy they were thrown in the recycle bin though? Like how many people are even doing that? Like you know how many people just throw trash in their car? Like I have a designated bag for inside of my car where I'm like, when I get to the gas station and the bag's full, you fucking throw it out. But I know people that are literally like swimming in their own like things of bottles, and I'm like, you are literally being that sea turtle video that we all hate to watch.
So there's, I think it's level 1 through 5 is the highest I've seen. I think I've seen like 1 or 2 6 maybe. So it's just like the composition of that material is recyclable. So for instance, a plastic bottle, if it's made with certain materials, it'll make it a 5 as opposed to a 4. So if it has those materials in it, then that will decide if the state has the ability to recycle it, compose it, or things like that. So that's why there's different numbers on each different thing.
That's really tasking for anybody that doesn't actually give a shit about the environment.
So like I know most people are like, oh well, I see the symbol on it, so I'll throw it away. So I think at school, what I ended up doing at school, because this was a minor thing at where I went, I ended up printing out the state guidelines for recycling, and I ended up putting them in my school office. That was like, all right, everyone knows now. These are the things you can recycle. This is why you can't recycle them. X, Y, and Z. So, and then people actually started going ahead and doing that. They started recycling in the right spots. They knew what to recycle, what not to recycle. So,
I mean, you got to look at it like the Simpsons movie when they were going to dump in the lake, and there's like he busts through all those fucking barriers. And there's an old guy holding up a sign that says "You suck" because he's like the last layer of defense before he drops it in the lake. Ran the dude over and dumped anyway. It's like you could put so many signs in front of people, but they still don't do that. Like the craziest thing I saw was like my cousin spent time with us over the summer. He's a little bit older than I am, but he cares a lot
yep.
about the environment more than I do. I think it's because he takes massive drugs and just chills out in the environment, which I think that's probably our best bet or avenue to go down. Fuck the lawn care people, like the ones that are like, I need to take care of the land because it helps me play golf on it. Like, all right, you're cool. I mean, I get it. You're probably more in touch than most people, but my cousin, he takes like what? Forgot what he did when he was down here. It was like ecstasy or something. And he went out into the woods. And I'm like, we're in a fucking beach town. Like, where are you going where there's woods? And it's like 45 minutes away. And it's only like a mile and a half of woods. He just started wandering. I didn't see him for 2 days. Like, I thought I was going to have to start being like, hey, guys, this is the police department. I was just wondering, could you help me find my cousin? He's been in the woods for 2 fucking days. And I don't know where he went because there's nowhere else you could go. Like, you can literally drive 20 minutes and then see the end of the
Yep.
forest. And he's like, well, when's the last time you talked to him? Like, he sends me Snapchats, but I just can't find him. Like, he's just sends a picture of his foot and then he's gone for like 10 like 10 hours, and he sends another picture of his foot. But he was like, the way you get connected, and I started talking to a lot of environmentalists, and they're like, it's all geometric patterns. Like, you start to find a way that someone looks at the environment and starts to realize why they are connected to it based on things that maybe a certain moment in their life, like a certain memory that really kind of bolds strong with them. I'm a camping guy, so I mean, I used to go camping all the time, and those were kind of where I guess created a lot of my love for the environment and stuff. But at the same time, it's like people don't really want to change or want to take notice on things until it's at the red line when it comes to themselves medically, when it comes to the earth. I mean, if we told you right now that this planet had a year left to live and there's no fucking way to change it, even if everyone started recycling, people would start recycling, even though they know there is no possible way. There's that glimmer of hope that maybe they can change it. But then what happens if we get to that 365th day or whatever, and it's like, hey, the Earth's doing all right now, and it's actually going to last another year. Then people are like, well, now it's a fucking conspiracy. Fuck this, fuck that. McDonald's trash out on the ground. And I'm just like, oh my God, man. Like, why in my yard, out of all places, pick up your dog shit and don't throw your double quarter pounder trash on my lawn, you know?
I think it comes down to people having profound experiences. That's that experience where it's life changing. So one day at work, I had a profound experience with an animal that I met, and I wanted to learn more about the habitat that he grew up in that area. So, and then by doing that research, learning about the issues and the effects that are facing that area. So that's like, okay, so we have to do these things in order, for him. So it's kind of selfish. Like, I want his species to do excellent. I want everyone else's species to do great too. But this is the species I care about the most. So I'm going to change my behaviors to make sure that his environment and his species environment is perfect for them to continue growing. And that's kind of how people think about it. People think about it like, I want my beach to be the best beach. So I'm going to do these things to make sure that my beach stays the best. So it's that inner selfishness, but it leads to the greater good as well.
Have you looked up? There's this place in Canada called Marineland.
I'm about to Google it right now.
There is a guy who was just on a Joe Rogan podcast. He's been on a couple of times, but he talks about the bad stuff that they do at Marineland, such as trading animals, such as force feeding animals, dolphins, and all these types of things. It's really fucking crazy. And you would think, like, it's Canada. Why are you doing that in Canada? You're supposed to be the nice place. But then you start looking at it, like, you start to realize, like, we don't understand animals fully. That's my biggest concern with the environment, is the fact that there's going to be a whole large group of species probably that future generations are never going to see. And people always think that, oh, we'll just be able to clone them later by getting a DNA sample. There's plenty of animals that are long extinct that we're never going to be able to replicate, on the concept of we've lost the DNA. There's no way. I mean, there's rhinos, there's different species of elephant that are just being abused, where there's only one left and the one that's left is too old to breed. So it's like, all right, well, how much are we going to rely on technology? Wouldn't you rather want the actual natural thing? It's like if I cloned you and then I said to your mom, hey, like, I got you another son. It's the same guy. So if he dies, you got two kids. And she's like, no, because I know which one's a clone. Like that thought never goes out of your head. It's like that whole aspect of, like, I was watching Rick and Morty, and Rick died in one of the episodes, and they're like, just
Yep.
throw him in the cloning machine and then reclone him. I'm like, it's not you though. It's a copy of you, but that's what I'm saying. It's a copy. It's not you. It's not the OG original. It's not the natural 100% authentic you. It's like there's that slight fragment that might be off, even if you narrow down every single feature.
So not only that, I mean, even if we were able to clone animals, if the habitat where the ecosystem isn't there to support it, it's just going to die out again. And it's like, well, we keep doing this. Why do they keep dying? It's like, well, because you don't have the things in there to support its life. How can you bring something up in this world that you can't support? And it's just going to keep dying and dying and dying, and it's going to be like that. Also, so for Marineland, it doesn't look
Oh,
like
you Googled it?
they're.
You Googled it?
Yeah, I'm actually on their site right now.
Oh, their
So it doesn't
site's
look.
not going to have anything about it. They actually stopped tweeting about they stopped talking about what they were doing with animals, like doing the shows and tricks and stuff. So now they're only doing stuff for educational purposes. But since coronavirus, the guy who was on there that they're like have been on a lawsuit with for, I think, the past 12 years now or something like that, something ridiculous. He originally worked at Marineland and exposed all the stuff that they were doing with force feeding dolphins and fish. And
Yep.
they've just been back and forth on Twitter, suing each other. It's still going on today. They actually have a walrus there that had imprinted on the guy as his mother. And the thing about animals is that we don't really understand is when they imprint, that's like there's no other bond or connection that animal has with another thing. So she doesn't eat, she doesn't sleep. She's, I think, 19 years old. They were going to transfer her during the start of this coronavirus to another zoo in Germany or something to be able to breed her walrus kind,
Yep.
just to keep the species alive. But Corona shut it all down, and somehow I guess they artificially inseminated her or something, where they actually should have a tweet saying that the walrus has had a whatever they would call him. I wouldn't call him a calf, but they would have baby or whatever. But it's just it's a crazy Joe Rogan episode. I'll just admit that much. But yeah, Marineland is just nuts. I don't know what their site's showing you.
So what I'm trying to find is see if they're AZA accredited zoo. Do you know what an AZA accredited zoo is?
No.
So it's the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. This organization goes in. So most zoos are only accredited by the FDA. So they only check to see if humans are negatively impacted, if it's a safe work environment, if it's a safe environment for humans to visit. So there's enough bathrooms, things like that. So they're not actually checking animal life. So what the AZA does, though, is the Association of Zoos and Aquariums goes in and checks those zoos. So they accredit those zoos to see if they're actually maintaining high animal standards, husbandry standards, health system for the animals, and things like that. There's also the Humane Society. At least I know for the U.S. context,
I'm
the
about to
Humane
say
Society.
that's USA. This is Canada's Marineland, and it's funded. It's not a actual like. It's funded by one guy, and that one guy has died. So now they have,
Okay.
I think it's his son that has taken over or something, or one of his stepkids or whatever. But that whole thing was funded by one guy who wasn't entitled to anybody, like didn't owe anybody money. He was a self starter, and all he did was keep buying and buying animals. He was a bit of a hoarder, from what I've heard, at least.
So it sounds like Joe Exotic, and
Yeah, basically that. Yeah.
yeah. But the AZA doesn't just do the U.S. So they have there's a couple of AZA facilities down in Mexico, and the AZA is now international. So there's the World AZA, there's the EU AZA, there might be a CAZA, the Canada equivalent. So I was just trying to see if that's the case, because if that's the case, then they shouldn't have that accreditation, and I know AZA does a good job of doing that. So at least when I go to zoos nowadays, I look for that rating to see if an outside independent source is coming in and actually checking. Because they do an accreditation every, I think it's 4 years. They come through every 4 years and check everything. And
But
they
wouldn't
do.
it be easy for that one day though to just make everything look like it's supposed to be in order, then fuck around for the rest of the years?
It would be easier. It would be easy, but there's certain guidelines you have to submit to the AZA as well. So like if you're opening a new exhibit, it's like, okay, you're opening a new exhibit, but does it meet X, Y, and Z criteria? Because if it doesn't, then you're not. It's no longer AZA. It's no longer an AZA certified facility because you're not following the guidelines. And also, a lot of what AZA does now is the education and conservation side of the house. So that's where their big focus is, and along with the animal husbandry
Would
piece
you
of it too.
consider zoos ethical? Like, in my opinion, I think they are, but I also think they're not. Like, I fight two sides on that one. One, I think it's needed to be able to show kids maybe animals that they wouldn't be able to see naturally. I mean, from like obviously not just a selfish point, but also for educational purposes. But I think
Yep.
that they need to be like rehabilitated, maybe animals, like animals that have no chance of surviving in the wild. Like they've completely like either they're missing fangs, either they're missing things that are like key points to survival. Have those in zoos so at least you can help them survive rather than just toss them right back out and have them get killed. But like perfectly like cubs or something that you're raising in like protected wildlife or something. I'm just like, that doesn't make sense because then you're really kind of taking out a lot of its key features of survival. It's kind of like how we built up houses in all these cities and corporations now that if you gave somebody, to do Naked and Afraid, we wouldn't make it more than like a couple of days. Only on the aspect of like, we want fucking heat, we want soup, we want someone to rub our head and tell us bedtime stories or our Netflix to lull us to sleep. Like there's this whole ounce of like, you're taking out their survival thing, which I think is a crucial aspect in life.
So a lot of animals born in in zoos and aquariums, a lot of them are institutional animals to begin with. So their lifetime has been within institutions. The only case that the only case that animals born in institutions are released are endangered animals. Um, so like the American red wolf, for instance, there's only 12 left. As far as I know, there's only very few breeding pairs. The zoo that I often visit is a sponsor of that program, so they fund the research component of it. They help assign breeding pairs and all of that. And they also have, I think, one or two that are breeders. So when they breed cubs, they will go out to those protected areas to help repopulate the genetic code. The other thing is it comes down to the species survival plan, which every endangered species animal has or threatened animal life has, on the breeding requirements for them and who they get paired with, because you want to make sure there's no overlap in genetic stuff. So there's a lot of behind the scenes, like, well, if we do this, we see this as like a first cousin or whatever. Would that have a negative impact? And will there be genetic deformities? Just like humans, right? You don't want to marry your second cousin because then your kid has a fish head. But that's the same thing. But that's the same thing in terms of animals. The other thing is there are some zoos that do um, rehabilitation, or they bring in animals that wouldn't survive. So again, the zoo that I often visit, they have three eagles. Two of them are bald eagles. One's a golden eagle. The two bald eagles had their wings destroyed in a human interaction. They were flying and they got hit by a car. And because of how the wings are set up on an eagle, they weren't able to get repaired. And they tried therapy, they tried different surgeries, whatever, and it was found that these eagles would not be able to fly to get their food. So because they weren't able to live in the outside, we brought them into the zoo and we feed them every day, but now they're a conservation animal and we use them for educational purposes as well.
Whose fault is that?
For the eagle get hit by a car?
Yeah, I look at that as the Eagles' fault. I mean, I'm pro animal. Let's try and rehabilitate. If I look at it like the car can't fucking fly. So
Right.
it's like when you watch Randy Johnson when he threw that 99-mile-an-hour fastball in that stadium and he hit that fucking dove or bird.
Yep.
That's the bird's fault for flying into the pitch. Like you had one spot you don't fly at, but I mean, obviously it's a strange coincidence. I'm not saying that,
Yep.
that they deserve it or anything. I'm just saying when you look at that, I'm like, that's not entirely 100% fault of the human, but there's people that will pay fines on the aspect if they hit a bald eagle or something with their car.
Correct.
It's like, what the fuck do you want me to do? I was pulling out of a 7-Eleven and a fucking eagle just flew across. Like there's a big thing down here with ducks, for instance. We have a lot of geese population down here. Never hated a bird more than I hated geese. Only because I've sat so many times, like waiting 45 minutes for a car in front of me to watch these geese just walk across the street. And
Yep.
I don't like a bird that has a mentality where they don't really give a shit about you. They look at you like you're not going to hit me. So they just strut across. And I mean, 45 minutes, these geese flew across or just walked across. And then finally, the last one went. And I'm like, finally. And I mean, legit 45 minutes. I'm like, finally. Then the woman started going, and all the geese just flew right back over the street in a matter of a minute. And I'm like, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? But it was like, it's a fine if you hit one of them, which I think is important. You shouldn't just go out of your way to hit one of these things. But at
Right.
the same time, like they down here, they just make up so many crazy ass rules and regulations. There was an overpopulation problem of these geese because I think it was like 2-3 years back, we had a weird shift in our climate where it didn't get cold when it was supposed to get cold. So the geese never flew away. They just sat there like fucking whatever, winter's not here yet. So we don't need to fly south. So eventually they just euthanized a whole bunch of geese by putting something in the meat, putting something in like some feed or whatever and did it. And I was like, what the fuck? Like to me, that was a shocker. And I was like, all right, I hate them pretty bad, but I would never do something as sick as that. I was like, well, at least you could donate the food. Maybe they're like, no, cause it's all contaminated with that poison. I'm like, you fucked up. You should have did something else better than that, but you saw a quick scenario to be able to fix an issue, and then you completely just did this horrific event now that everybody forgets about. And I still remember it. I actually have the news article saved and posted on my wall. I was like, that's the town I live in.
Well, not only that, I mean, it just goes to show that, while yes, the state and, the federal government often sometimes have good intentions about wildlife, the means of doing it is just totally blown out of proportion and is more harm than good. I know there was the US has been always very anti wolf and anti coyote. Um and during the 30s and up to the 60s, I want to believe, there's something called the Coyote Wars, where the U.S. government spent, I think it was $10 billion in today's money to eradicate the wolf and the coyote. And there are coyotes everywhere. And yes, the wolf population died down, but the coyote took its place. So then the government spent more money trying to kill off the coyote populations, and it backfired in their face until they're like, all right, we're not spending nearly enough money on this. I'm not giving any more money to, keep killing off wildlife. It's like, you should not have done it to begin with. Let nature do its thing, man. Like, we're the ones encroaching on their space, not the other way around.
Yeah, I remember when I was like maybe 7 years old. There's this area near in Delaware near my grandparents' house, and my uncle took us fishing there, and it was like this open kind of like small little pond thing. I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. But there were like these little blue fish that would literally, like, thousands of them just come right up to you, like just swim around your feet and stuff. And you're like, oh my God, like I could easily catch one of these. So my stupid ass grabbed a Universal Studios, like one of those giant like drink containers, like the 42 ounces or whatever, and I would dip it in
Yep.
the water and try and scoop out the fish. I would never get them. They're way too fucking quick. But it was like that entertainment for me. But it was so cool to
Yeah.
see fish life actually come up to you and not be afraid of you for once. And then we went back like a year later, and they had built up fences, and they actually built a factory right by there where I think it was like a couple of years down the line. I ended up going back there and be like, you know what? Fuck these fences. Statute of limitations hopefully is not still around because it's been like 15 years, but went through where the fence part was, and all the fish were gone, and the water was completely changed too. It's actually got smaller, and I was like, this is what happens. Like, it ruins a natural beauty. Like, how many natural beauties do we have left that might not be around in maybe 10, 15 years?
It's like if you ever go to the Grand Canyon, I always recommend going to the Grand
It's
Canyon.
fucking awesome.
Another example of that, if you look at the rock walls, that white stuff that you see, that's the calcium from where the water used to be and where it is now. So like, so if you go to the Hoover Dam, for instance, if you go there and you stand on the dam where the high rocks are, where those white lines are, that's where the calcium used to be. So that's how high the water used to run in that area,
when
and
did you
then it slimmed down.
when did you go to the Hoover Dam?
I went there in 2018.
How old were you?
I was 24.
Okay,
Yeah, 24.
we did different things, I think, at the Hoover Dam. I went when I was like probably like 16. So all I did was grab a bunch of coins and roll them down the Hoover Dam. I didn't really get to take in the water and calcium deposits on the walls, but shit, next time I go, I'll make sure to like check that out. There's just stuff you end up missing, but like I think the best part about the trip to the Hoover Dam was probably going through the desert and seeing all like the Joshua trees, seeing all, and finding out that like throughout anything when it comes to animals, plants, they have been throughout folklore. I mean, anybody that is a historian or anybody that is even diving down the realms of maybe mythology or storytelling when it comes to old aspects of life should look at how many correlations there are when it comes to the religious tones of using nature, something that we can't explain, where there only had to be created by one deity or a deity or something that had to be out of complete, like out of human power. Like, it's something that is from such a primal essence that has been long here before we have even been a race. It really, I'm not upset by it, but I'm more upset on the fact of like maybe with like how we've been trying to genetically modify animals. I'm not a fan of like the bulldog everyone uses, for instance. Like, if we just bred that with another species, it would be able to breathe better. But at the same time, mules, like, they're bred with horses and donkeys, and you can't rebreed a mule. So we just have to keep breeding horses and donkeys to keep getting a mule. It might work for some aspects of like maybe some they can carry more, they look better, sure, but is that really like the stuff we should be judging on an animal's quality of life? It makes you think.
And quality of life is the biggest part. I mean, most people now most people are starting to shift to that quality of life component. But originally, people with the animals like, all right, what can I do for me? And they used it as work animals. Horses were used for work animals, oxen and all that. Bulldogs. It's interesting that you mentioned bulldogs. Bulldogs were originally bred to hunt, not hunt, but they were to distract bulls long enough for humans to kill them. That's why they were bred in England.
So like
Uh,
bear dogs.
yeah, kind of, yeah.
That's what they
So
do in
like,
Alaska. They just get a random dog and use it to distract a bear if a bear comes. That's fucking nuts.
So like bulldogs would go underneath like the bull itself, look up, and as the bull's looking down, the bulldog would grab the snout of the bull itself and pull it down, while like the bull's trying to get it off. That's when people would go in and kill it. And the thought process was that's how you got the best meat out of a bull, was because it was all riled up and moving, so the tendons were moving.
My brain immediately went, I gotta get a bulldog in case I ever get into a fight with a bull. But then I'm like, wait a minute, I don't live in fucking Spain, so there would be no point. Like I would just have this. Oh, wait a minute, we don't ever come across bulls. Like I need to find some. Like you ever see the Leon burger, I think it's called, but it's known as like a Russian Ostvaka mountain dog or something like that. They're bred in Russia to hunt bears, and if you saw the size of this dog, you'd be like, holy shit! Like I'm like, yo, that's Russia 100%.
I think I've seen those. It looks like a bear itself. I'm like, what the fuck is this?
My buddy used to own Newfoundland dogs, and it was so crazy because we actually had a woman call the cops on us. Probably a Karen before it was like a known thing to be a Karen. But she lived in the apartment behind my buddy's house, and when it snowed out, I mean, we had a really bad snowstorm one time, but we would sit there for hours and try and call his dog inside. And his dog's in Newfoundland. That's up in Canada. They're freaking like basically snow dogs. They're water rescue, but they love the cold. So to him, that was heaven. And we spent hours trying to get him inside. And she was like, I'm going to call the cops because you're abusing your dog. I'm like, he's sleeping in the snow. Like the door's open. Like our heating bill is going through the fucking roof because we're trying to get him back inside. But it was like this whole aspect of like, how many times do people actually spend time researching or learning something about a dog before getting one, or even learning something about an animal before maybe doing an effect that might harm that animal's quality of life? I would say, how many people call about an osprey or a bird or a falcon nearby where it's this tree that they're living in, so they decide to tear the tree down? It's like, then where's that thing going to go? If you live in a city and you have like maybe what, 100 trees out of like maybe 50 miles or so.
Yeah, that's the other thing. I mean, people doing research. I mean, people think that, oh, all dogs don't like being outside. Blah, they have to be brought in. It's like, no, there are dogs that love being outside more than inside. Huskies are one of them. Um, and it's just that whole research component where it's like people have this. I think people have this general observation about nature and everything around it, but don't do any further things into it. And then it's like if they see one thing wrong that might be actually totally natural, they're like, let me call the city and let them know about this. That way, or someone else to deal with this, or even companies. Companies also need to take responsibility too and be like, I should probably do research before I start digging up this habitat area.
People should have that thought initially, but they never do. It always comes later down the road when they want to do more research on it. It's like, I think the
After
code,
it's gone.
yeah, I think the code maybe to get an animal or get a pet is like you should do a lot of research on it. Like I wanted a sloth at one point. But I spent a lot of time doing research where I spent probably a year and a half saving up 5 grand just to be able to afford a sloth. And that's like, obviously I was taking money out for bills and shit. So I was like, it's going to take a while to get to that 5 grand. So I'm like, screw it. Might as well learn. It's really a lot of work. And I was like, I can't even take care of myself that well. Like giving it a shower every like it's like 2 times a week. I'm like, that's a fucking lot. And it's like, you actually have to scrub them. I'm like, sometimes I just let the water cool on my back and get out of the shower. Like I can't take care of a sloth, but it's that kind of like knowledge you need to know, that wisdom you kind of need to start researching for yourself and finding the proper information to be able to care for one of these animals. But people just see Joe Exotic and immediately want 50,000 tigers. I'm like, look, you're probably not the one that's going to be the Joe Exotic, the one that can actually stay alive. You're going to be more like the person that got their arm torn off and like when they went into the cage. Sorry to say. Sorry to say.
Was that before or after you wanted to get your falcon?
You fucking listened to my episode. How dare you?
Yep.
No, I mean, I wanted to do the falconry license, but what tore me away from that was the fact of it took 2 years to get the actual, like, you had to study under somebody, then you got a falcon, then maybe like 7 years in, you get an owl. And I'm like, to me, I don't want it that bad. And I think that's a good key factor. Like, when a parent's like, I want you to really think about this tattoo or something, because it's going to be on you for the rest of your life. Fucking think it through. Don't get a tattoo of a Pokemon card on your leg out of a split decision unless you fucking know that's what you want.
Ouch! I feel attacked. I'm joking. Totally joking.
Do you have a Pokemon tattoo?
I don't have a Pokemon tattoo. I have a bunch of pop culture tattoos. Like I have a bunch of Star Wars tattoos.
But you love those. You love those.
Yeah.
Okay, you know how many people just see something like, I fucking love that, I'm gonna get that. It's like, no, don't get a tattoo of a starfish hugging an asshole. It does not make any sense.
I mean, it might to that person at the time. I'm joking.
Let's say my cousin's, I mean, not my cousin, my uncle's a tattoo artist, and he's actually been on the podcast before, but he talks about like the worst ones, tattoos he's given are shit that's like you're drunk. It seems good at the time. He always gave me the rule of thumb is wait 6 months. And if you really still want to do it, then you go and do it. So I haven't found anything for 6 months I want to get tattooed on my skin enough. So
yeah.
You gotta have like deep meaning to it, like something with like a family thing to me, I guess. I don't know. It's hard to figure out what you want to put on your skin that you're not going to regret later. I saw like 7 seasons of Ink Master or whatever the hell their number they're at just by watching Facebook videos. Jesus, man. You want to talk about people that really go. Here's an issue I have. If you go on Ink Master and you want a tattoo of a pinup doll with like scars on it and shit, make sure that's what you want. And then when you get it, don't bitch about it. That is the dumbest thing to me. That and PETA. As much as PETA might enjoy this episode, I don't like how I think the issue is educational stuff or things that seem to prioritize environment don't actually give a shit about the main issue. PETA in 2013 did the dumbest fucking thing that and I only know this because I eat a lot of this food. Animal crackers. Their big fight against the government was getting the animals on the packages out from behind bars. In 2013 that passed, and they consider that a win. I'm like, what the fuck can we go to the countries where there's like circus bears and lions and shit that are riding unicycles? Like that seems more of an issue to me than animal crackers. Stofers can take a break. I don't care, but I'm just saying, it's like, come on. Our fundamental policies when it comes to like what programs we have invested are doing some of the right stuff, but how much gets waived by some stuff that just seems like you're just acting out to act out, you know?
And not only that's those spotlight issues, right? Like it's that thing you can see every day. But at the end of the day, you have to invest in actual conservation institutions that are going to actually go out of the country, go to international levels, and start making changes there. And that's where all the hard work is. And people don't focus on all that hard work. They focus on, oh, well, I got this to pass just my locality. Yeah, locality is nice because you got to start small to get bigger. But you have to start chipping away at the big stuff too, collectively. You have to help with that. So, I mean,
that size is definitely perfect for that scenario because you have to think about all the stuff that goes into it where everything's so mix match back and forth. It's like, we have a budget to fix a lot of these issues, and how much of it is really getting focused on? Like there's a lot of documentaries that come out. There's actually a documentary on Marineland. It's stuff you start looking at like, are we still in the past? Like, and then people freak out when Shamu bites somebody. It's like, you fucking wonder why.
yeah.
Really? Would you like to do flips in an enclosed habitat? I think the only study that really piqued my interest in all this stuff was like, I found out a marine biologist, she started to live with a dolphin. Like she filled up half of her house with water just to be able to live with this dolphin. They actually developed a relationship where the dolphin was like, it was like a sexual relationship. And I was like, okay, from a standpoint, that is fucking nuts. But also you have to look at like how closely we connect to a species where like people look at dolphins and they're like, they're so smart. Dude, their brains are fucking bigger than we even know. Like we barely even understand our own. And the fact that they have different accents based on where they're from, that's to me, that's a sign like we need to start paying attention more to the animals here, pay attention to more of earth life on here, like how the earth is living instead of focusing on going into outer space and going on like the moon or something. As much as space is fascinating, but like shit, dude, I want to know if there's a giant kraken or something. That would be pique my interest 100%.
There's a quote that I try to memorize from time to time and think about things. It's we don't own the earth. The earth we don't belong. The earth doesn't belong to us. We belong to the earth. And it's like, yep, that's pretty true. Especially with all these different, every animal has different niches. Every animal develops their own unique adaptations. Even though they're part of the same bigger family, they develop um their own communities within. They have their own community norms, just like humans. So it's bridging that gap between us and not the us and them, but it's like they are us just in a different form. They communicate a little bit differently. They look a little bit differently, but what human doesn't do that too?
There's a song by Little Dicky called Earth, and it was like the most fucking like heartwarming like video ever, where it kind of shows you like we're all just people. It shows the animals, it shows everything on there. It even got a cameo from Leonardo DiCaprio. Like he doesn't even say much, but it's like you have to look at like how far to the bridge the gap. You want to talk about a bridge of a gap? A dude that's rapping about his dick and being too high makes a song about the fucking earth. Like, come on, man.
Didn't he put that out on Earth today too?
That would be good timing for it. I would see him do that. Yeah.
Because I think I remember like that coming out and like that populated my Facebook feed. I was like, all right, I guess I'll check this out. I listened to him like, yeah, this is pretty awesome. The beat's right, the message is right. It's like, this is great.
I think also the fact it shows that like maybe a lot of those guys did it for like good attention, sure, but it was a giant bunch of appearances from a bunch of famous people where it was only a quick little snippet of a line or something that they would all say, and it was combined into this video where it shows like it doesn't matter what level of fame you're at, we can all come together on the same conclusion that we all share this earth together. So why make it worse for the next person or next generation? Like on my personal Instagram, I post pictures of sunsets. I know that might sound corny or whatever, but it's something we can all share. When you look at the grand aspect of what people like to post on social media, it's all fucking what they have and what someone else doesn't. Oh, here's my new car. Here's this, here's that. A sunset is just something we can all share, we all experience, even though you might not look at it at that instance. It's something that really can kind of take a load off of your mind, at least for some people. That's why I see doing yoga on the beach. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. That sounds fucking awful. Carrying your yoga mat and your flip flops with socks on, you son of a bitch, all the way down to the beach. That sounds awful. But if it's for you, go ahead and do it. But I think enjoying that view and watching that, I mean, there's just an overall vibration in the air where I'm like, yeah, the world has a song to it. Depending on what day and what you're feeling, it means something different to you. But there are specific moments that you can correlate perfectly with a song.
100%. I know on my personal Instagram page, a lot of it's from stuff that I do at work, which I work around various animals. So I'll post like if the sun's hitting like low enough and like the elephants are out, I'll take a picture of like that background of the sunset with the elephants, and it's like, oh, so that way, you know, it's everything everyone experiences, but also something that people often don't get to experience as well. So like seeing an elephant, they may not have an opportunity to do that in real life. It's like, yeah, it's a little bit closer to the screen, but then they know where it's at, so they can go out and venture and see it in real life too. So
Positive views on the future for environment or negative views on the future in like the next 10, 15 years? What are your thoughts?
um I think locally, environmental issues are going to pick up, especially with this newer generation. I've seen some things from my own work perspective that a lot of younger families are getting involved in the environmental movement and they want to do stuff locally. Um, the caveat to that, though, is it's always, you have to chip away at things in your backyard before you do anything federally, but without a positive, or at least a positive conversation about environmental issues on the federal level, it could go either way. So right now, President Biden seems very hopeful with things. He seems very optimistic about the environment. I don't think his record and some of the rhetoric he's talked about during his campaign trail reflect that. That's just my own personal viewpoint. Um, so it could go either way. Depends on who he appoints to the EPA and what the EPA policies are, and what they do from there.
That's why I'm going to reference the Simpsons movie again. Um, the EPA, Russ Cargill, when he was on there and he wanted to put a dome over Springfield and his problem was just blow it up. I was like, Yeah, that's honestly the best fix I see. I understand his point of view, but I mean, you shouldn't kill all those people. But at the same time, how are those people ever going to learn to respect the environment? It's like 2 weeks, what, after you start to realize immense damage to the earth has been done, you start fixing your ways, but then you revert right back to your old trackings because how easy it is just to throw a wrapper out the window than it is to actually find a trash can, get out of your car and throw it away. It's really fucking difficult. That's why, I mean, we have people that take care of that stuff, take away trash and stuff. But at the same time, like there are small things you can do in your every single day life that can really add up to the grand aspect of things. Like I tell people, grab a little plastic bag you get when you go to Food Lion, put it in your fucking
Car.
passenger seat, whatever, and just throw your trash in there. Like my state just made legal that there's no more plastic bags. Now they're doing paper bags, and people are fucking pissed. And honestly, it seems like a bigger waste that they're using paper bags because they take up more space, they rip, you have to go through more of them. I'm like, this is like it seemed like a good solution, but nobody actually thought this through. Like we need to be focusing on like what are better ways to, counteract this. Where's our funding going? Where's the guy collecting all the runaway masks that sit in parking lots? Like, how many masks have you seen in a puddle? It's the most depressing fucking
Ugh.
thing in the world.
Everyone's like, "Oh, I have all these boxes of masks." Okay, what do you do? Oh, I just take them off and throw them on the ground. Please don't say that.
It's like
I'm.
spitting out your gum. It's just fucking take it off and throw it on the ground.
It's like just buy reusable masks and then you just wash them and then you own them forever and they're clean. You don't have to throw it anywhere and clog up everything.
The people always talk about like, Katy Perry even said, you ever feel like a plastic bag? I'm like, now it's got to be like, you ever look like one of those masks in a puddle where it's like your life is just really depressing? Like they're just fucking soaked and just like, and like sometimes like after like the cold or whatever hits it, it's like ice, like frozen. So it's like, what life are we in? Like an apocalypse instead of tumbleweeds, it's fucking masks just flying around everywhere.
I don't make me think about that. That's in my head. I'm just seeing like a giant glob of mass just rolling down the hill.
And it's slapping you like if you stuck like something on like the front of your car, it keeps flapping like in the breeze. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? It's like just slapping you in the face over and over again. It's like, yeah, okay, thanks for reminding me. Thank you.
You know those movies where they have like the piece of paper hit the person's face and it stays there for like a bit and he's struggling to take it off? That's replace the piece of paper with a mask.
That's like the story of my life, like walking down the street and you step in dog shit and you're like, damn it. It's like,
Again?
where's this dog coming from? I think it's got to be like a labradoodle or some shit. Like that's all they have in my neighborhood where I can't narrow it down to got to analyze the poo and shit and be like, all right,
You have to analyze the poop. You have to triangulate the poop.
where did this poop come from? From like this is where math comes in. You can use the Pythagorean theorem to see which dog took a shit in your lawn.
And then you find out it's not any dog in your neighborhood. It's from the dog like three neighborhoods over, and they're somehow walking in front of your house.
Outsider. Outside. Have you if I was going to predict what the future of the world is going to look like, I think it's going to end up being like The Happening, where the plants decide to say go fuck yourself and they just release a pheromone that kills everyone, like gets them all to like jump in front of lawnmowers and shit.
I'd rather that not be the situation, but I mean,
I mean, there was a government project I've talked about, like I think it was like 1940 something. A dude tried to discover if there was a such thing as plant perception, since there were people that could see the paranormal or see like what they would call supernatural. A guy and actually government did an experiment called plant perception where they boiled a bunch of shrimp in a like little pot on a stove next to a plant, but hooked up sensors to it, and they would sense to see if the plant could actually sense the screaming shrimp in the little boiling pot. I know you're Googling. I can see it on your face. So Google it.
yep.
Tell people I'm right. Tell people I'm right.
I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it on Wikipedia. Even though Wikipedia is not the best source.
Why would they lie about that? Who gives a shit? That's what I'm saying. Nobody gives a shit about plants, so you can lie about something like that.
There's a fandom page on it. That's unique. Okay.
People are probably still trying to do that. It's like the same thing with Scott Pilgrim when the vegan guy was like, I'm vegan. And he gets all these superpowers. I bet you there's a giant spark of people wanting to be vegan.
There's plant gravity perception by NASA.
What is that? Like I can sense this plant has gravity to it? How do you even test that? Who the hell's doing dishes?
Oh, my roommate's doing dishes right now.
Tell him thank you. Just
I'll make sure I tell her that you say thank you.
I'm glad. Wait, did you ever thought about using paper plates that are a little bit easier, or is that bad for the environment?
That would clog everything up, in my opinion, if we just use paper plates as opposed to. I mean, yeah,
Clog
there's
what? Your dishwasher? Are you washing the paper plates? That's really ghetto if you're doing that. I've
No,
done it.
clog up the trash, man.
You just throw it away. What are you talking about to clog up the trash? You got to remember to unmute yourself, David. I don't care if there's dishes going off in the background.
So one snippet says gravity perception is important to plants because they need to send their roots downwards towards water and nutrients and their shoots upwards towards the light. Plants are known to detect gravity using statlons, which are small starch-filled packets that settle at the bottom of gravity-sensing cells. However, mutated plants lacking functional statlets still show constant through reduction responses to gravity, suggesting that there's another system for sensing gravity.
Science, and I wish I need to actually print out that document so I can highlight the words I didn't know, which it's going to be a lot. I know words, but that was a hard one. But yeah, okay. It's from NASA too.
Yep.
That's how you know it's real. I don't like NASA right now because they fired a woman for what she tweeted, which I think was incredibly irresponsible of them to do that.
Twitter's getting everyone in trouble nowadays.
I had mentioned this on a previous podcast. A woman that worked for NASA had said, she said, holy fucking shit, I got a job at NASA. And some dude that regulates like people's tweets that work for NASA to make sure it doesn't infringe on the company or whatever, said language, like commented that under her tweet. And she said, suck my dick, I work at NASA. And just the fact that it was a chick saying suck my dick was the funniest thing to me. So whatever. All right, NASA, I'm going to read your article, but David, dude, this has been a fun conversation, my man.
It has been pretty fun,
Wasn't
going down
as
the rabbit
bad
hole
as you thought. You said let's talk environmental. I totally forgot about it until we started talking it.
And here we are, still there.
Well, is there anything you want to promote, man? Like you're on Twitter. I know. Did you say you did a podcast, or you don't do that?
People can find me at historian_Tibbs on Twitter, and then I am a co-host on a podcast called Operation History. It's me and 3 to 4 other historians. We all get together. We just talk about events. Our newest episode, which came out the 9th, it came out this weekend. It's about the 1996 Rhode Island oil spill. So we get environmental on there, and I run that episode up. But we talk about other things. We've talked about the Christmas truce of 1914. We've talked about the first Thanksgiving, when Pilgrims landed in September. So we go all out.
You go all over the map.
Yep.
I like that. That's a good one to end on, and I'm going to end it there. Thank you for listening to this episode Out of the Blank podcast. Stay tuned for our next episode.